Well, you got the septet gig coming up on the 30th.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. The night before New Year's. New Year's Eve.
So who is in this edition of the septet?
This edition, well, it's mostly the primary guys. I have such a large family in that band now. I've got, on this particular one, Dan Gaynor on piano, Andre St. James on bass, and Ed Pierce on drums. And then the horn section is going to be myself and Paul Mazzio on trumpet, Brian Dickerson on alto sax, and Stan Bach on trombone.
That's some all-stars you got there.
Yeah, I love my job. I get to play with the best of the best.
You know, Ed Pierce is unsung.
He really is. He's kind of quiet about, you know, he doesn't self-promote, but he's one of the best drummers in town. And when I say one of the best in town, Portland has so many great musicians on every instrument that you know, we're really like a lot larger city than we are because there is just so much talent and so many great players. And Ed is one of my favorite drummers. He's just always a solid. He always knows exactly the right thing to play at the right time. He's not flashy or showy, but he nails it.
Why 7?
Why not? I like writing for a septet with the 4-piece horn section because that's kind of the minimum number of horns to really make it sound like a big band. I write arrangements, you know, with if there were 3 horns or 2 horns, you have to write unison rhythms. I won't say you can harmonize, but you have to have people playing pretty much the same thing at the same time, or else they sound wrong. You know, it's like if 2 guys are playing one thing and one guy is playing another, it just sounds like somebody's in the wrong place. But with 4, you can have some nice counterpoint going on with 2 guys on each part, or 4-part voicings. There's a lot of possibilities there. So I started writing the charts for this band as a way to kind of get close to some of the early Count Basie things with Lester Young and those guys, the Kansas City sound. And you know, back then everybody had a big band. Actually, this was even before the big bands, but there were a lot more larger ensembles. So a lot of my earliest experiences with arranging for this band were condensing things down to make them fit a manageable sized band. And I kind of found that 4 horns is the right number for what I like to write.
So you were going for a big band sound?
Well, at first, yeah. And it's, you know, it's like everything, it evolves over the years, and I also really enjoy writing things that sound a little bit more like a small combo, like a Jazz Messengers kind of a vibe. And that's, you know, of course you can get away with fewer horns there, but I still like the ability to have 4-part voicings and some counterpoint, some more complex arranging things going on to sort of add that little spice.
Yeah. So will you be playing your originals?
We'll do some originals and some. You know, there's so much great music out there that I didn't write that you know, it's fun to do other people's music too.
Yeah.
So one of the wonderful things about jazz is that you can take somebody else's music and still make it original just by putting your own flavor into it. And so I've got original arrangements of some of the things that were written by other people, and then I've got a few original compositions too. I just finished writing one that we're hoping to debut that is in 7. You know, odd meters are something that I myself haven't spent a lot of time devoting myself to over the years, but you know, I'm kind of feeling like if I'm going to write something in 7, it's because the melody line wants to go there, and because the rhythm wants to feel natural in that meter. You know, in other words, I wouldn't write something in 7 just so that I could write something in 7.
Yeah.
Like, you know, this is what I'm hearing.
Some people might.
It just happens to be in 7. Yeah, there is a lot of that. But
what is the challenge in working in odd meters?
The challenge for me personally, and I can only speak for me personally, is making it feel natural. It's something, you know. We don't have 3 legs when we walk, so we have 2 legs, and so that's one of the reasons why the duple meter makes sense is because it feels like we're walking somewhere. We're going, and you know, 3 is a fairly common time signature for most people, because that's, I think, people have danced to things in 3 for as long as there's been dancing. And so that's something that I think that is in a lot of people's heads as feeling natural. But meters like 5 and 7 and 11 just don't feel normal unless they do. And that's something that is it's a challenge to make. You know, like if I'm writing something in 7, it's you either divide it into 4 plus 3 or 3 plus 4 or some combination of that, so that that's how it lays down rhythmically. And that's, I think, the challenge for me is making something, coming up with something that feels natural in that meter, even though it's not the way we normally would walk or dance or
The recording that you're working on right now, is that with the septet?
Parts of it are, yes.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of things that'll be smaller versions, smaller groups. You know, a couple of duo and trio things, just because I like doing that too. But the majority of it is going to be septet stuff.
Yeah. And what kind of material are you doing?
Well, I've gone into the Duke Ellington Billy Strayhorn bag a little bit, and there are a lot of really brilliant things that those guys did back then. And I've got a couple of things that I've written that are original arrangements of Strayhorn tunes, and I've got a couple of other things that I've kind of tried to do justice to what Mr. Ellington did with that, because you know, there's still, he was so far ahead of his time in terms of orchestration and the colors, the tone colors that he was working with, and the flavors. It wouldn't be right to presume to think that we could do it better than that. Yeah. And yet we try to make something that hasn't been done yet, and so there's the rub.
Yeah, well, you sent me a couple of tracks that you're working on. I know, I always hesitate to ask musicians if they like to let the public in on the creative process and how things are coming along. Are you ready to unleash any of those yet? Or it's okay if you don't.
I think, you know, some of them, the arrangements are done. It's just a matter of mixing, and I think, you know, there are certain things.
What was the one that wasn't Chelsea Bridge? My brain stopped working.
I did what of the 2 I sent you. I think I sent you Upper Manhattan Middle.
Upper Manhattan Middle, yes.
And Chelsea Bridge, and then did I send you Main Stem also?
No. You sent me,
I got to send you that one too.
All right, well, of all of those, which one do you think we could listen to? Let everybody hear what's going on.
Let's put Upper Manhattan Medical Group out there.
All right. And what did you do with that?
Well, I started out, I listened to a bunch of different recordings of how it had been done already. And I started with the what I think at the time was the definitive recording of that. Don't ask me why I think it was the definitive one. It's just, you know, that's the one I always hear when I think of that tune. And I started that, and I kind of did a study and tried to transcribe as much of that as I could. And then from there, I went back and I started over from scratch. And I said, okay, now if I was going to come up with something that is reminiscent of this, but original at the same time. And so that was kind of my approach when I wrote that. And then, you know, that was, again, a full-size big band that did that. And I'm working with a small group with 4 horns. And so there's a decision process whether we cut corners and leave something out in order to make it work with only 4 horns, or whether we try to do something else that sounds like what the original big band intended, or whether we just go completely new and fresh and go a different direction.
Well, why don't we let them click on that little green button underneath the screen here?
Click
all right?
the green button.